What's up, everybody? It's your favorite Origins favorite nerd. Today we are going to be talking about explaining and reviewing Transformers Megatron Origins. And you can buy it in this trade, and we'll talk about the other way you can buy it here in a second. This was the original trade that was released of the 5 issues that make up this series. Written by Holmes, illustrated by Milne, who you know is fantastic. And this is a pretty good trade. You can come across it for a fairly inexpensive price these days. If you stumble across one like at a Comic-Con or something, I think it's out of print at this point. But you know, full color, good stock, good everything. IDW makes a good trade. I've only picked up their Turtle stuff and their Transformer stuff, but they do a pretty good trade. This one comes with some extra art, all good stuff. I think it's all Milne. Yes, looks like it to me. So the other one I think does not. And then you get a little bit of Milne sketchbook, which is always a treat. You know, he's a pretty talented dude. So some character designs and so forth, and all that stuff is pretty good. So this is this retailed at $17.99. Usually you can get it in a 50% off bin at a good Comic-Con, and you know, so you can get it for like $9 or whatever. It's definitely worth its price. The way I recommend you buy it though is in this, which is Volume 1 of the Transformers IDW Collection series. They come in a big book, oversized, hardcover with you know, the little bookmark piece in there. And IDW had a pretty sketchy past in terms of how they handled Transformers initially, but what these collections tried to do was put them in the best chronological order possible. And this includes the entire arc for Megatron Origins, and then it goes beyond that into the kind of ongoing series. But it's a very, very nice book. Doesn't include the extras though, so that's a bit of a bummer. It would be nice if, like, at the end of these books they included a ton of extras, like the Ultimate Edition DVD kind of thing. But they are nice. This retailed at $50, but you can usually get them between $20 and $30 on Amazon or eBay at this point because they're kind of old. But they look very uniform. They look good on the shelf, as we'll take a look. So they did 1 through 8, which is kind of before it kind of splits off into More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise. So this is kind of the Autobot Decepticon war, and then after the war is over, you know, you get into this series here, Phase 2. But all the Phase 1 books, they're complete. They look good on a shelf. It's a done. You know, you get them and you're done, which is a nice thing. People often ask, like, you know, where should I start? Where should I buy IDW? This is definitely the way to go with these Ultimate collections. And they have a presence on a shelf. They're uniform. They look sharp, and they're good quality. So those are the 2 ways to do it. And now that we have that done, we'll get into the explanation and the review of this book, story-wise, and then we'll come back and kind of take a look at, you know, what the story's about. All right. So we open on Cybertron in a time of peace, which is already something that we're not used to seeing, and immediately we're kind of given the idea that there's a caste system. There are those that have to do work mining for Energon, and then those that sort of reap those benefits and have other responsibilities that they are accountable for. And it's established that there is a discontent between the classes. Pretty early on, we come to the terms with the notion that life is not precious to the Cybertronians, especially in terms of class and caste. So these workers in the mines, their life doesn't hold as much worth as, say, those in the higher class and higher caste. So it's not but a few pages in where a protester is killed by a member of the higher caste security, and then Megatron is introduced mainly for attacking the security agent that dispatched one of his brothers, and thus seemingly starts a revolution pretty early on, mainly in revolt to the Senate closing down the mine they were currently working on and redistributing them into different mines to do different tasks. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess for some, this revolution is pretty short-lasting, and armed security pretty much take down most of those who begin this early revolution, this premature revolution. Megatron is held prisoner on a ship en route to what we suppose is a prison-type planet or facility, and he is prisoned there with Rumble and Frenzy. It's not long before they take over that ship and redirect it back to Kaon. We're then introduced to Beta Prime and also to Prowl, which establishes that Prowl has been a right-hand man to the upper echelon of primes since long before we knew. And he's sort of informed of the past events, and it establishes that there is a bit of a quarrel as well between the politics and the primes, which is an interesting spin on the Transformers kind of mythos. Back to Megatron, he has now become a bit of a gladiator on Kaon, and we see him destroy what looks like a Psykill type character, which is kind of a cool Easter egg. We're also introduced to Ratbat, who is a senator and definitely turns into a robot and into some sort of bat type creature, as opposed to the cassette tape. And he is a slime ball, kind of out for profits and those sorts of things over top of, fellow Cybertronian life or any sort of moral or ethical kind of standpoint. He's become aware of these gladiatorial fights on Kaon, and it's definitely piqued his interest. But he's not the only one that's become aware of what's going on in the pits. Prime and Prowl and the other Autobots, and they do carry the Autobot symbol already, have also become aware and are concerned. So they have plans to kind of shut down that situation as well. But back to Megatron, where we then have the kind of pleasure of seeing the first encounter between Soundwave and Megatron. Soundwave was kind of lurking in the shadows and offered to help Megatron with different kind of battle technology, to include possibly Shockwave's cannon, Megatron's firearm from the 86 movie, as well as the mace from the first episode of More Than Meets the Eye from G1, and then he comes out and he kind of pledges his allegiance. On the other side, we have his tapes, at least Laserbeak and Buzzsaw and Ravage, that kind of put an end to the initial infiltration of the Autobots and then bring them to Megatron. We also get the kind of encounter, the first encounter with Starscream and the Seekers with Megatron, and that one I kind of feel like was a little less than stellar. Like Soundwave just kind of brings them to him because he was requesting air combatants, and you kind of want something a little bit more monumental for their first encounter, but that's how it goes here. But he doesn't waste much time putting them in service, and he has them attack a funeral that the Autobots are kind of holding for the other two members that were just killed by Megatron, that were spying on the gladiatorial fighting arenas, and in the process kidnap the senator. Meanwhile, Megatron has put out kind of a call to all of the kind of working class and the other gladiators and the lower caste systems, and requested their presence at kind of like a big meeting where he makes his call to duty. The Predacons are there, the Stunicons are there, even Grimlock is there. And we start to see the first hints of kind of global conquest that he has in mind. But it's quickly interrupted by a team of Autobots that kind of gas grenade the entire arena, and in the process, Megatron is captured. But Soundwave is released because the data pad that the security are looking at kind of requests it, so we are left to assume that there's some sort of sabotage that has gone there on his part, or the part of his kind of pets. Starscream, we start to see like kind of the first layers of treachery, where it looks like he's going to snitch or provide information or intel to the Autobots or to the government at hand in order to get kind of an early release. And he is taken away too, we theorize, in exchange for information. But Starscream ends up being taken before kind of this hearing, just to kind of have all these important people in one place so that he can unleash a barrage of attacks, and Soundwave is there too to back him up. So we start to see this like double-sided coin to Starscream, where just when you think you can't trust him, he proves that you might be able to, and you know what I mean, that's sort of like potential two-faced side of that character. And subsequently they free Megatron, who then advises to free everyone, all the prisoners, and hopefully they'll all rally to the same cause. And he keeps kind of reiterating to also rally behind one badge, but that badge hasn't yet been kind of defined. And then that kind of leads to a larger scale battle. At the same time, Soundwave kind of confronts Ratbat, who he's well aware of by this point is holding kind of finances and political prestige over top of life. Pretty much takes him out of commission, and then we see him alter Ratbat's kind of circuitry and turn him into a cassette, and then place the cassette in his chest. We then kind of move on to the big showdown between the Prime and Megatron. This is our first Prime versus Megatron battle in kind of Transformer lore. Prime is like in super armored up mode, Super God Genrai type of Prime, and Megatron taunts him by saying, "Come out," like, as if to say, "This isn't you, so I want to fight you." But he doesn't come out of his armor, and he takes a big shot at Megatron, but it doesn't do the trick. And Megatron kind of puts the hurting on him. While they continue to fight, Megatron has some pretty profound dialogue. You know, where he says, "I've heard it said that we only gain wisdom through suffering, and tonight I intend to make you very wise. I will create desolation and call it peace." You know, like we start to see kind of the psychology of Megatron begin to form. And ultimately, Megatron roughs him up pretty bad, and then has Starscream drop his body off to the other Autobots. It's like a sign of nothing can really stop us at this point. Like, your most powerful warrior is done. That causes the Autobots to pull out of Kaon, thus giving Megatron initial control of Kaon, which is kind of where his conquering begins. And in the last page of the book, we see that Megatron has the Decepticon symbol on his chest. And that's how the book kind of closes. So overall, pretty good book. You know, it's in the early years of IDW, so they hadn't quite gotten their footing yet, and maybe it was a little premature to tackle such a big character's origins. Luckily, you know, the beauty of comics is that you can come along later and kind of fill in gaps and you know, develop certain themes and ideas a bit more, which they definitely do if you get the Ultimate collections or the IDW collections around Volume 8. You know, they start to expand it a bit, and then in More Than Meets the Eye, they go into it a bit more. But the interesting thing here is that you get to see a few origin stories, which is nice. Rat-Bat, the meeting of Soundwave and Megatron, and then the meeting of the Seekers and Megatron, which is fine. But the good thing about this, because this is really, you know, establishing the foundation of Megatron, right? So the good thing about this is that it doesn't victimize him. A lot of times when they do these origin stories of villains, they victimize them. Take Hannibal Rising from like the Silence of the Lambs saga. You know, when they do his backstory, he ceases to be this like brilliant psychopath. He ends up becoming this victimized kind of character. And I think a lot of times that belittles a villain. You know, I don't think every villain needs to be a victim. And while he was born into a set of circumstances that were, say, less stellar than another character or unfortunate in regard or in comparison to other characters, it didn't victimize him. He was still strong. He overcame it. Did he overcome it the best way? Debatable, but probably not. But that's what makes him him. That's what sets him aside from the other robots. That's what sets him aside from the other Decepticons, that he had the fortitude and the foresight to see that there was a way out of those predicaments in which he was born. And that's one of the cool things about IDW is a lot of it has to do with this caste system. You're born to a set of circumstances, you react to those circumstances a certain way, and then you either elevate or decline within those circumstances. And that's a very cool thing, but for him, he didn't want that cage put on him. He wanted to be able to grow in whatever way that he deemed, you know, appropriate. In a lot of ways, it's not too different from the Autobot cause. It's the measure in which they, you know, go about meeting that goal that makes them different, and that's what makes Megatron cool in IDW. So I definitely recommend it. It's a good read. It's a little, you know, it's in the beginning. It's 5 issues. I think it probably should have been 6 issues to kind of expand upon, you know, the relationship between Soundwave and Megatron in the beginning, the relationship between the Seekers and Megatron in the beginning, and kind of like, you know, spoon feed it a bit more. It moves very quickly because it has to wrap all of this up in 5 issues. But a lot of like the political climate, the cultural climate of Cybertron and all that kind of stuff that's established there is a good beginning. And then later on, you know, they expand upon that when you get into like the Impactor stuff and how world plays a part into it and all that kind of stuff. And that becomes even better. But the important thing here is that even in the beginning, they laid a pretty good foundation to build upon. Could have probably expanded it a bit more. It's not the most in-depth. A lot of these Transformer comics in IDW have done a really good job of world building, which I'm a huge fan of. And it didn't quite do that enough, but it laid the outline. It laid down I hate to keep saying foundation over and over and over again. Make it a drinking game, if you will. But it laid down, you know, the blueprint of how to kind of build the Transformer universe culturally on top of it within IDW. Unfortunately, IDW has kind of gotten a little out of control, in my opinion, in the last couple of years, but that golden age of what Transformers is and was there, this was a key component and interesting, and an interesting look into the psychology of Megatron. This idea, this character having all of these obstacles placed before him, not being a victim, and deciding which path he wanted to take, almost making him autonomous, you know, which is kind of the Autobot way. So it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of how the two kind of themes or thought processes or philosophies relate to one another. So I hope you enjoyed it. These are a ton of work. I don't do them often, but yeah, we're kind of due for one, and nothing new is coming out. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.